Hello and welcome to our webinar, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. My name is Jennifer Saunders and I'm the Marketing Director at All Traffic Solutions. Before we get started, just wanted to let you know that there's a chat box on the control panel at the right of your screen so that you can submit questions during the webinar. We will have time to answer some of your questions at the end of the presentation, and all answers will be provided via email after the webinar. You'll also receive an emailed link to the recorded presentation. And now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, John Fagan, Director of Strategic Business Development for All Traffic Solutions.
Thanks, Jennifer. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I do appreciate everyone's time today. For those who don't know me, I've been in the parking industry for almost 10 years. I've been with All Traffic for the last 6 months. But today we're going to look really at how cloud-based software, along with sensor technology, web-based signs, really any data analytics and how they are enabling organizations like yours to operate and optimize parking operations. Specifically, really by communicating that timely information to parkers and pedestrians, really calming traffic, improving safety or traffic safety, and providing a better customer experience. And then finally, really leveraging the data that we just mentioned for better decision making in the future. So that's what we're going to talk about today. By way of an agenda, and hopefully everyone can see my screen, we're going to talk about new technologies, really in plain English, and how they can address your toughest parking challenges, how those technologies and data analytics fit together, and how you utilize them to get improved communications, really greater efficiencies, even safer outcomes in your facilities. And then really three, I want to provide actionable tactics and strategies to implement at your organization. So a couple of housekeeping items. I know Jennifer mentioned we will have time for questions at the end, but there is, as Jennifer mentioned, a text box or a chat box. So if you have a question, feel free to submit the question. If I can, I'll certainly try to bring it. I'll try to address it during the presentation. If not, there will be time at the end if I haven't already touched base on it. So as I mentioned, I've been in parking for really the last 10 years. And really for the longest time in parking, hardware was the main focus of operations. And slowly over time, the focus has shifted a little to really more flexible software, mobile solutions that are out there that are accessible anytime and really anywhere. But we still have a lot of that hardware, and with that new technology that's out there. So, what does that look like? What's the current, landscape in the parking world per se? So this is what I call the network effect, and this is only really the tip of the iceberg. So if you think about an iceberg, that we've got a lot of things here, but the reality is, in an iceberg, everything else, there's a lot of stuff that's underground or underwater. So you've got a lot of different components, that organizations like cities or universities, airports, hospitals, private operators, and more. They've got all kinds of different hardware like signs, meters, access and revenue control equipment, handhelds, and a lot of software platforms to manage the back end. So, taking this as an example, this is just really a cross-section of what an organization like yourselves might face. You've got, if you look in the middle, Pierce County, they could have any different number of different technology throughout their organization or in a neighboring community. So they could have meters from Calais, they could have a back end using T2 systems, they could have a Mono McGann in a garage, they could use street line sensors to detect particular occupancy spaces for particular facilities. They could have traffic signs, whether that's through All Traffic or Daktronics or Wonka. There's all kinds of different communication methods that are out there. And then there's pay-by-phone companies as well. So, there's a lot of different companies that are out there, and that doesn't even touch on, the GPS systems of the world, Google Maps or Waze, private organizations, that are operating within a city or near a university, and how their parking or their issues could impact Pierce County's issues as well. And, so there's a lot of different components that are out there. And so the issue is, how does all of this technology work together? Well, that's where the Internet of Things, or IoT, really comes in. So the IoT simply or really just means devices that can connect to the Internet, and which allows them to send and receive data. So you can manage assets, whether that's parking, transportation, law enforcement, public works, traffic and safety, et cetera. Really, there's any number of different types of equipment and types of organizations that will have devices and data that you would like to be able to pull from or receive, send information to. And then, so in addition to, the new technology we have, we also have, technology that's on the horizon. So, this is touching on really what is out there today. And again, this is just a small sampling of it, but that doesn't even touch on where we're going. So, by 2020, I believe that the idea is there's going to be over, or the thought is there's going to be over 10 million self-driving cars on the road. So I'm still trying to candidly wrap my head around that number, or really just one self-driving car on the road. But I will say, I was at a meeting earlier this year with a customer in Northern California, a private software company, where I was there to meet with 3 individuals. When I got there, for anyone who either lives in Northern California or has been to Northern California, traffic can be a nightmare there. When I showed up to the meeting, which started at 8, there were 2 of the 3 people that were there. So they said that the other person was going to call in on the phone, and so I thought that meant that I would just be having a telephone conference with the third person. In actuality, they literally pulled up a video feed of the person in their car because he was in a self-driving car that was taking him to work. So I was literally looking at him, and I could see the car moving in the background because he was on a video chat. So that technology exists today. It's only going to become more prevalent over the years. You can see the statistic for 2020. There's a lot of different companies that are already working on that. So you're going to see that more and more. And so, then the issue or the question becomes, how does your organization address, deal with autonomous cars, but also where are they going to park, right? Because we have to be able to identify the issues that are coming and how are we going to solve that. And then, that's not, so that's not even touching on other issues. So, for example, we've got 30% of city traffic is made up of people looking for a place to park. So, that's a problem, as I mentioned. Northern California and most urban areas are facing this issue today. So you've got people that continue to circle around looking for places to park. This causes congestion. It can cause accidents, and generally really upsetting everyone involved, whether that's the drivers, whether that's pedestrians, whether that's even workers, whether that's toll workers, law enforcement, even parking enforcement officers. You're finding more and more people out there, so you're seeing more and more issues. So how do you solve that? Well, unfortunately, expansion, the easy answer is, well, we'll just add more parking spaces. I've talked to, I don't know how many different parking operators over the years, and I can't tell you, the almost 99% of the time, the issue is they can't create more parking. They have to deal with what they have today. So, in a perfect world, it'd be great. Yeah, we'd love to just add more parking. But unfortunately, that's not the way, that's not the way the world works. The other issue is, there is new technology that's out there, which we're certainly going to talk about today. But a lot of times people can't necessarily just go out and buy the newest or latest and greatest technology, right? So sometimes you have to stick with, or you have to deal with your operations the way you have them. And so, how does that look? What are we going, to do? We've got commercial real estate, those prices are increasing, and so you're dealing with less and less square footage on a day-to-day basis. It's becoming more cost prohibitive really to build those facilities. So how do you go about, achieving your goals, which really are never going to change, right? So you always want to reduce your operating costs and you want to maximize your profit. But how do you do that if you can't have, you can't just go out and add more parking? Well, you certainly have to get more efficient at doing what you're doing, and that's what we're going to talk about in this presentation. So, in addition to everything that we've touched on so far, operations are also becoming more encompassing. So, 10, 20 years ago, there wasn't much parking that occurred on the weekends. When you left, when people left for work to go home from work on Friday, they didn't come back into the city until Monday. Or, when you had a retail district, after 9 o'clock or, 7, 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, everybody went home. There wasn't issues. Whereas, today, people will be, either live in an urban community and stay there all weekend, or, your operations may have to work 24 hours a day. You've got different facilities that are going to be open round the clock, and your operations have to react and manage that accordingly as well. So you've got to be able to manage and see this information at all times. So what you need to do is be able to track and analyze your data as much as your operations are open. So again, 24/7. But as we already talked about, people are spending more time circling, looking for a parking space, which leads to lower customer and employee satisfaction. So part of the issue, really so how do you solve that? So part of the issue with congestion is really there isn't enough signage or information for drivers or parkers. Parkers simply don't know where to go, whether that's from a notification from a sign on the road or an app or their GPS or their phone. They don't have that real-time information. And so what that causes is people will go to an area where, for example, parking is already full, right? So they'll go to a place because that's where they parked before, but this time they'll go and there isn't any parking available because, again, all they're seeing is static information or previous experience, and they think, well, there's parking here, and so I'm going to go here. And then when they find out that they can't, that will cause lines to back up. You'll see queuing on the roads. So, for example, I live in the city of Tampa. So in downtown Tampa, there is, an arts district where the Straz Center puts on performances, and there's one main parking garage and then a lot of other surface lots nearby. But generally speaking, I'll try to go and park in that surface lot. So I'll go into the line for the surface lot, for the parking garage. I might get up or near the front because, again, that parking garage, the main entrance, essentially backs straight to one of the roads in downtown Tampa, and you'll get queuing onto that road, and it'll back up, a light, at least one traffic light, if not more, and then you might get all the way up there, and then the garage might fill up, and then you have to go somewhere else. So, you don't have, in Tampa today, for example, you don't have that ability to see what the parking looks like. I always go to that garage because that's where I've parked before, but occasionally I find out that parking lot is full when I try to get up there, and so then I have to redirect and go to a different location, and so that takes a longer period of time. It leaves me frustrated. It'll leave the pedestrians that are frustrated that are trying to cross the road, and so all of that really can be avoided if you had this information to your customers, and we're going to talk about ways that you can do that, but those are really one of the problems that are out there, today. So as part of that, you're also seeing, drivers, anyone that's driven, in the last couple of years, you're seeing drivers are becoming more aggressive. This leads obviously to, less, an unsafe environment, or certainly safety is going down, whether that's pedestrians or drivers, because you're seeing accidents increasing year over year. So there's, amazingly, really the statistics show, I was pretty surprised by this statistic. So about 1 out of every 5 motor vehicle accident or car accident in the U.S. occurs in a parking facility. That doesn't even include the nicks and dents that happen when you're in a parking garage or in a surface lot. And really 14% of all auto damage claims from an insurance perspective involve collisions in a parking facility. So, and again, these numbers are increasing year over year. So, the expectation is really those numbers are not going down. So how do you address those things? So, you've got a lot of different, you have a confluence of factors that we've mentioned so far. And what do you do? So how do you address, all of these issues? We've got, I'd like to say, everyone has heard the term smart cities. So, what can you do? I put here, you really need to adopt a smart attitude. So by that, I mean, if you go back to the idea of, a smart city, to me, that's a bit of a misnomer, because when people think of smart cities, one, they think of cities, but in particular, they think of large cities. That this is only applicable for, a large city. It really doesn't have to be a big city or even a city at all. So, at the recent Conference of Mayors, so in 2016 at the Conference of Mayors, they actually documented there have been to date about 335 implemented quote unquote smart cities projects. Of those 335, only 69 were for large cities. Actually, 98 were for small cities. And then going forward, there's about 460 or just under that, 459 planned smart cities projects. Of those 459, again, only 103 were for large cities, populations over 1 million. 225 were for medium-sized cities, and 131 were for small cities. And again, those from the Conference of Mayors, those statistics are for cities, but candidly, the operations are the same, whether you're a city, a university, or certainly they are similar for cities, universities, hospitals, airports. They all face the same or similar challenges. So really, in my opinion, the attitude or the philosophy is the same. You may, tweak it, by your organization's business needs, but they're not going to be substantially different. So that's why I say using, a smart attitude can really make the difference for your operations. So what does that look like? So you really want to leverage new technology like sensors or other devices. You want to make sure you can use that the existing tech or technology you have can track data. So for example, an organization might have, whether it's a city, a university, or whatever, they might have meters already today. Whether those meters are the old single head meters or some of the newer pay by space or pay by any type, pay by space or pay by time, there's really, that technology can be upgraded to provide, that data. So you can get, you can send that information into the cloud, you can get and leverage that data. If you're using a single head meter, just one of the old meters, you can still, you can upgrade that, whether that's through, for example, like the IPS, you're going to add credit card payments. By doing that, you can, quote unquote, make it a smart meter that will then be able to collect the data so you can see how many people are parking even using older technology. So just because, I say, embrace or use some of the newer technology doesn't mean you have to go out and completely upgrade your operations. There are ways that you can, just simply, tweak the existing infrastructure that you have, and then as that equipment reaches its end of life, you could then go and upgrade it to the full suite of technology. But there's different things that you can do to leverage that so that you don't have to completely overhaul your system, straight away. And, by doing this, you can, using the meter example, you can start to track your metrics in your operations. You can see where people are parking, where they are, where there's potentially an enforcement issue, and then you can plan, for the future. You can start to see, if there are hot spots and where you might need to address either through enforcement or additional parking or what have you. So in addition to those, in addition to just sort of embracing or, looking at your technology, there are other ways, there is new technology out there. You've got, different apps and sensors that are out there that we're going to talk about. So from the, for anyone that's attended IPI, the International Parking Institute's annual conference, over the course of the last, really 3 to, in some cases, 5 years, we have seen a tremendous amount of growth and a tremendous amount of new companies that are providing apps, for your operations. And, specifically, you're seeing that around parking. So they're displaying where people can go for parking. Now, up until recently, generally speaking, the apps, they did a great thing. They're showing you where there is parking, but generally speaking, what they're showing you is, using Tampa as an example, they will show you where there are surface lots and or garages, how many total spaces there are in those facilities, and what the hourly or daily rates are for those facilities. That's a lot of great and valuable information that we didn't have previously. What they're not doing up until recently is giving you real-time data, showing you what the actual occupancy is, or how, whether or not those facilities that they're showing you actually have spaces available in them. And candidly, I'll tell you, that's one of the reasons why I joined All Traffic. So I've been in the parking industry for a little while, and I really like the idea of what All Traffic is doing, and that we're trying to, use that and leverage, the Internet of Things to be able to take data from all those different sources and then give you that data at your fingertips and let you, manage it accordingly. So, we don't necessarily want to get into the business of building another app. If your organization already has one, that's great. We want you to utilize it. But we want to be able to make sure that all of that data can get sent to them so that they could see whether, if you're using Park Mobile for your pay-by-phone application, or you have, Texas A&M is not a customer, but if you wanted to use, if they had their app that could show you what the real-time parking information is, or Florida International University, you could see that so that their students could then see, okay, well, this lot is full now, I'm going to go to this other lot. Or, if you have a sign that you can message from an event perspective, you can start to see, using Tampa as the example again, I could see from a sign, okay, the garage that I normally go to is full, so now I'm going to go somewhere else. And so I can get that information at my fingertips, which then I can send to my customers or my consumers' fingertips as well. So that's really, some of the, the different ways that you can do that, whether it's an app, an in-ground sensor, so you can see, you can be as, as granular as you want. You could see how many specific spaces are available in a parking garage. You could also use, nowadays we're starting to see more camera-based solutions, so you could see whether it's a garage using a camera-based solution. I even saw at IPI you can start to do that on street as well, so you can mount cameras on street and you can track occupancy if you don't have the ability to track it using smart meters. So there's lots of different ways that you can start to do that. And then, one other thing that I didn't mention so far is, there is additional ways, that sensors that are out there that can be utilized to track occupancy. So, for example, you can, if you have, a surface lot that you didn't have a way of tracking occupancy before, there are, pretty easy ways to track that occupancy now. There's, you can certainly use sensors of several different kinds, and they can be, those solutions can be plug and play type solutions, so easy to install, but they give you that higher accuracy rate that you wouldn't or normally see. So in previous years or in the past, what you've seen is you get these tracking systems or occupancy tracking systems that can get way off. So for example, all traffic is based in Herndon, Virginia, which is just outside of DC. There is a retail district in Reston, Virginia, has a garage that has a parking guidance system, which is great, and it's certainly something that I encourage. The issue or challenge that that garage and that guidance system has is they have about 1,000 spaces in that facility, and when we pulled into the garage, it said there were 300 spaces available, and we drove all the way up 10 floors of the garage and all the way back down and never found a space. So you can't have, your accuracy can't be that far off, because if they are, you're going to see, just like I was, a very upset customer, which will lead to upset business owners, as in this case, it was a business, a retail district. So you're going to get a lot of upset people. So, you need to see, and the technology exists today to be able to provide, much higher accuracy rates, which then can be integrated with other systems, and you can collect that data. So this is just some examples of where you can see it. Like it's pretty common. You've seen this for years of being able to track occupancy in a garage, but you can also do it in a surface lot as well. So you can start to see whether it's a camera-based system where you could mount it from a light pole, or other sensor type systems that you can track vehicles coming in and out. So in the past, you may have to have done a manual inspection or have an attendant in the facility to be able to know what the occupancy is. Now you can have devices that can track that, and it can be fully automated. So you have that ability to do that and manage and measure that data in a meaningful way. So what does a meaningful way mean? Well, you need to be able to analyze your data. So you need to be able to see, from a reporting perspective, you want to see occupancy over time. You can use, whether that's using heat maps, whether it's using, to see what the busiest time of the day is, or bar graphs or charts. You need to be able to put this data in a meaningful format so you can analyze the data, and then you can provide it to your constituents, your bosses, your board, or whomever, so they can see it in an easy-to-read fashion and then be able to act or react accordingly. So these are some examples of what it can look like and what you can do. And that really helps you plan for the future. So again, you have the ability now to count and track your parking, what your occupancy looks like. Whether that's, and so now you can plan whether you need to build more facilities, whether you need to have more enforcement, whether you need to increase your safety initiatives. Maybe you have more, you've got accidents or speeding in the garages or in your in your enforcement areas. That gives you, this reporting or this data gives you, the ammunition you need to talk to, those constituents, the students or board, whatever you need going forward. So what does this all lead to? So by way of, I talked about having actionable, methods or actionable data that you want to take from, from this. I've really come up with sort of 5 business practices. I'll call them more recommendations that, an organization should implement. So as we discussed, the needs of parking operators have become much more sophisticated in terms of monitoring and reporting. So, I have here, you want to be able to use the cloud, right? So that, going back to the Internet of Things, you need to be able to, or, IoT, you need to be able to connect all of your devices and have all of them be able to talk to each other so that you can, you can monitor your system, your alarms, your occupancy, your license plate recognition or LPR system, video streams, intercoms, even geolocation. So this will make your system easier to manage, and it will increase, your safety and efficiency for your parkers and really for your pedestrians as well. You know, number two, and I've said this a few times today, you want to be able to leverage your data. So everybody says data analytics, and you can't see me, but I'm using quotes when I use that term. But what does it really mean? So it's great, and there's a lot of companies out there today that will give you data, but if all they're doing is giving you data, that's not data analytics. That's not, you know, you have to be able to have your data and be able to use it in a meaningful way. So it's important to have a system that I would say is what I'd call open architecture, which really just means it can send or receive data. So, you know, you want to be able to take data from somewhere and send it somewhere else, and then vice versa, because otherwise you'll have a lot of different disparate systems that you then have to manage each separately. You know, that, and so that really goes against, you know, the whole concept of IoT. It allows for easy integrations, analyzing all of your data in one place. So, as you know, as an example, a couple of years ago, I was working with a prospect, and there are, you know, it was a large city. They had a lot of different and disparate systems. So, for example, in this city, they had 3 different meter companies. They had 8 garages, but they had 4 different access and revenue control companies for the hardware in those 8 facilities. They had 1 company that managed the handheld, their enforcement software, as well as the permit management on the back end. They also had a separate pay-by-phone company, and they had an internal finance department that was measuring and taking payments for permits and utilities and what have you. So they had really 10 different and disparate systems that they were collecting data on. They had no way to manage all of that data. So they literally would spend, and I talked to them and asked them the question, they would literally spend at least 1 full week every month of collecting each of the data for all of those, putting it into one format, and essentially so that when they would present to their superiors, they could see it all in one, essentially one chart and one report. So they literally had to take a week out of their time collecting all of that data. So that really, again, goes against, the technology or, the IoT. You want to be able to take data from those meter companies, put it in. It doesn't necessarily matter where you send it to, whether it's, if it's your meter company, if it's your park system, if it's, something else, if it's your, if it's your pay-by-phone company or wherever, or if it's another company altogether, it doesn't really matter, but you need to be able to collect all of that data and manage it in one place, because otherwise you'll get, you'll have to spend a week, like this customer did, where they were, having to pull each one of their reports and then mesh it with and merge it with other data and other operations or specific operations. So that's what you're trying to avoid. That's what you're trying to create. And then once you get the data, the key really is what makes it data analytics is you need to be able to analyze the data. So for example, you need, the ability, let's say we're talking about enforcement, you need to be able to see where where there is, where there's greater issues with enforcement, where you're seeing more tickets, and then react accordingly. So for example, there's technology out there today that could allow you, if you're looking at it from an enforcement perspective, you can essentially create a beat generation list. So for your enforcement officers, you can see where you can essentially map out where they should go on their routes for enforcement. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be for, to generate more revenue. I think you always want to be careful because you've got constituents that if you're just you're just writing more and more tickets, you can face, a PR, issue from that. It doesn't necessarily have to be about that, but you need to understand what your business needs are and then analyze that data based on those business needs. So if you are trying to generate more revenue, then you would create this, this route, officer route, to allow them to write the most tickets. Or you could still do the same, but instead of writing those tickets, you could see more of, instructional, letting officers, writing warnings to let people know, hey, this is an issue, you need to, fix it so that we don't have to write you another ticket, whatever it is. If it's instructional, if you do just want to generate more revenue, whatever your business objectives are, you need to be able to analyze that data accordingly. Same thing from a parking occupancy standpoint. You need to be able to see where there is your parking occupancy. And, for example, nowadays it's great. You've seen meter companies being able to zero out the meter once someone leaves, which is great. The other thing that you would, and you're starting to see this now, is you would like the ability to be able to know if somebody pulls into a space, whether it's in a garage, a surface lot, or on the street. You would want to know whether somebody does come in but doesn't pay to park. So, for example, you would want to be able to analyze.
Apparently, we have lost John's sound for a moment. Just give us a moment, and we promise to have him right back with you. I'm sorry, just give us one more moment and we will have John's sound back.
Hello, can you hear me now, Jennifer?
Yes, John, we can. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I could hear you, but for some reason you guys couldn't hear me, so I apologize for that. So that's the key really with data analytics. You need to be able to measure the information and based on your business objectives. So you need to be able to not only get the data, but then analyze it and react or manage it accordingly. Number 3 is really provide, your real-time occupancy info to the parkers or your riders for all areas, whether that's garages, surface lots, on-street parking. This is what we talked about over the last, 30 minutes or so. This is going to reduce your congestion. It's going to get people to the spaces faster, get them on about their business of either working or spending money, which candidly is going to make everyone happier. And then you can use that data to help you plan for the future better. So, if you can see where people are parking as part of your overall facility management or your facility map, you can see where you may need to add another garage. And then but that data gives you the ammunition to back up your claims that, hey, we're reaching capacity. We need to add more spaces, and here's how we can go about doing it. You can start to do some regression analysis to see if you wanted to change some of your parking rates based on the current your occupancy. You can see what it would look like going forward. So then you could see how you could help pay for some of these facility. So that's where, again, that data analytics is going to help you manage your operations in the future. Number 4, drivers are becoming more aggressive. So as an organization, you need to plan accordingly. So whether that's, really implementing or creating, calming signs for speeders in a garage, or, messages to a sign or an app regarding, letting people know that there's been an accident or there's congestion on the road. For example, so I was in Georgia and Atlanta a couple months ago for the Parking Association of Georgia show, and it was right after, for anyone that's familiar with Atlanta, it was right after the 285 bridge collapse. So I wasn't there when it happened, but certainly if I was, and you had the technology, you could alert your drivers, whether it's through, messaging signs on the road, but also through, Google Maps or Waze or other ways to let people know, hey, pretty severe accident, please, divert and reroute yourself, and then have those systems reroute them accordingly. So that's another way that you can do that to help ease congestion and overall, really your customer experience. And then finally, you really want to use on-site and specifically real-time messaging to communicate with your parkers. So whether that's, time to destination or virtual drive times with Waze or Google Maps, like I just mentioned, but you also have, that's one way to do it, but you also have consumer data that's, being captured by apps and other solutions that you can use. So for example, you could send a push notification, to, a customer or to anybody that comes into the area to their mobile devices, letting them know of local events or special promotions. You could even change rate structures based on usage or occupancy. So you're seeing some demand-based pricing for parking spaces. Here's again where you can start to do that. You can use those data analytics tools to see and provide, more variable pricing based on, needs, high time of day, those types of things. And then on top of all of those things, you could provide, advertising to local businesses to display, notifications. So, if you go into a retail district and you can get, business, right, you can get revenue from those business owners to provide advertising, letting them offer $5 off if you come to this restaurant for lunch. So again, you can help maximize your revenue. It doesn't always have to be, though, through, enforcing more tickets or increasing your rates. So, because obviously there's only so much that you're going to be able to do on that front, but you have the ability now with this technology, with apps and other, even the pay on foot stations, the meters have the ability to offer advertising for those people, and then when they print their tickets, they can get a coupon from a local business owner to offer that up. So there's different ways that you can maximize revenue, not just simply adding, not really just simply adding for that, just increasing the price to park, basically. So if you do all of this, what does it look like? So now you've got a centralized cloud-based system that can connect to your organization, whether it's a city, a university. That can be connected to signs. That can be connected to your Department of Transportation, so your highway system, to let people know where there are issues or traffic calming issues. That can be communicated to the signs that are on the roads, again, whether it's on the highways or in the cities or in the towns or communities, letting people know where there's places to park. That can be communicated to your traffic studies, so you can collect data for future planning purposes. And then you can send that data to, your neighboring towns. So again, in Tampa, we've got St. Petersburg and Clearwater that are right next to each other. So you would like to be able to communicate, letting people know, hey, you've got an accident somewhere in Tampa. you may want to, you may need to plan accordingly if you need to get there and how long it's going to take. And then that can be communicated to your devices, whether it's your in-car device, your TomTom, your GPS, your Garmin, and then they can be communicated to the garages, to on-street meters, as well as private companies as well. So there's a lot of different. Once you get all of this, you can see this is the same slide that we looked at originally. The difference is now you are all connected. You can take all of that information from all of those different disparate sources, put it into the cloud, and then manage it accordingly. So I didn't see any questions come in, at least initially, so I will touch base to see if anybody has any questions. Feel free to ask away. We've got a couple of minutes left, so if there are any questions, I am happy to answer anything that anyone might have asked.
Oh, John, in the meantime, I'd like to ask a question, if you don't mind. What kind of reporting metrics should an organization look at?
Yep. So I think, again, from the reporting side, you need to be able to manage, see your data based on your business needs. So to me, that's the most important part. So a lot of companies that are out there and have been out in the past, they've really just, they've given you your raw data. So they'll tell you how many parkers you have and what have you, and then that's it. I'm not, I think that's great, but I think that technology exists now to take that to the next level, to be able to take that data and then manage it accordingly. So for example, what I talked about before was, if you wanted, to analyze how many people are parking in a facility, you feel like a facility has filled, has reached its capacity, you need to be able to justify to your superiors that you may need to increase your parking. So you may need to add another parking garage. Obviously, parking garages are not cheap, right? They cost a lot of money. So you need to be able to see how, one, justify that you have the that you have the parking issue, which you can do through showing what the overall capacity is looking like. But then you could start to look and take it to the next level and say, okay, well, here's what would happen if I am now, increasing by 50 cents or $1 per hour, what the cost is to park. And so that to me is where the data is really imperative, right? You want to be able to take the data and use it for your business needs. So I don't think they're on the call today, but I know I've worked with them for years. The city of Savannah, they do not necessarily want to, they have limited space, and they're not going to be able to change where and how much parking they have. They've pretty much maxed out how much parking they're going to get, but they want to be able to get their people parked as quickly as they can so they can start to see if they use some of the reporting capabilities that are out there today, they can see, okay, here's the facilities that are filling up the quickest, and then we can react and if we put up a sign or create an app and then redirect those customers to get them parked quicker. Obviously, anybody that's been to Savannah knows it's a very retail-oriented city. They want to get them parked, and so if you use this data to see where you have your biggest needs, your biggest parking issues, and then plan accordingly, you can start to see that, and that's where I think you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. So again, it all goes back really to what your business objectives are, not just taking the data, but using the data to achieve your business needs.
Okay, and John, one more question, just briefly. What do you feel is an acceptable accuracy rate for occupancy tracking? I know you're looking at those reports.
Yep, so I think from, and again, if you've been in the parking space for a little while, obviously you've seen, there's sort of, the idea that, in years past, you've had issues like, for example, when people are coming into a facility and they're tailgating, a lot of times they can't get picked up. So you've seen, accuracy rates, in some cases in the 80th percentile. I think, in some type cases might be lower. you know, to me, that it really isn't acceptable anymore. There's a lot of technology that's out there, whether that's in-ground sensors, whether that's IP-based cameras, even laser technology that's out there. They can really increase the accuracy rate. So I know of, you know, I know of technology out there that can see, you know, upwards of, in some cases, 98% or higher in terms of accuracy rate. Because the reality is, you know, you may not ever get 100%, but the issue becomes when you're tracking occupancy, you know, unless you're resetting day over day, your accuracy rate is going to go down, right? Because you're going to get people, you know, if you're off by 1 every day, then by the end of the week, now you're off by 7. So unless you're doing some resets, you're going to have these issues, and they're only going to get worse. So you want to be as high, you know, as accurate as you can. So you've seen, like I said, there's technology out there today, fairly inexpensive, that can get, you know, can get you to 98, 99% accuracy. So I think that's what you want to strive for. You want to, you know, look for, you know, the most accurate way of counting and tracking occupancy, because that's going to get you the real-time data to your customers, and it's going to be, you know, correct. Because that's, you know, if you get real-time information to your customers, that's great. But if the data's not right, they're going to be just as mad as if they didn't have the information. In fact, they might be more frustrated with it. So you want to be as accurate as possible, and certainly the technology exists for that. You just have to make sure that you look for it. So that's what that's my take on it. Sure.
Great. Hey, thank you very much, John. That's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. If you have any questions, you can contact John directly at jfagan@alltrafficsolutions.com or visit our website, and you'll also receive a link to the recording tomorrow, which we do invite you to share with your colleagues. And on Thursday, look for an exciting product announcement. This concludes today's broadcast.
Thanks, everybody.
You were holding your head. I was afraid it was oh my God. How's everything going with
the recovery? I can see very well, and so it's, it's not